So the ability to keep these precepts well is dependent upon ability to recognize and to keep abreast of the intentions forming in your mind, because sila in the Buddhist sense is essentially a matter of intention. And so we can see that there has to be this inner training to complement the outer training. You have to be mindful, in other words. So the wisdom faculty involved here is seeing the value of the precepts, each precept, each training rule that you take upon yourself voluntarily. Really see the suffering, the difficulties, the confusion that will arise from not keeping the precept, and the value and the benefit of keeping it. And this is one of the basic wisdom techniques. The very first initial level of wisdom development is this thinking in terms of pros and cons, as we say in English, is seeing the benefits and the drawbacks, and training oneself to do that in a very systematic way in your daily life, particularly in terms of the standards that I mentioned a moment ago, those things which free the mind, which uplift the mind, and those things which drag the mind downwards. And seeing, well, this particular activity, this particular way of speaking, does it make the mind bright and clear, or does it make the mind feel very cloudy and soiled after I've acted in this way and spoken this way? Do I feel guilt and remorse, or do I feel joy and contentment? So bringing those standards to bear in a kind of a pros and cons analysis of action is part of the training in sila. And the benefits that we can see very clearly are both internal and external. Externally, we can see that any family, community, society will thrive in the presence of trust, and will wither and will have serious difficulties whenever that trust is lost. And the trust is created and sustained when the members of a family or community have shared standards of conduct. So we can't, of course, forbid ourselves from having angry thoughts, covetous thoughts, lustful thoughts, and so on. But we can recognize them as thoughts and not feel compelled to act upon them. We can have a certain standard. Well, that's fair enough. That's a thought that's arisen according to causes and conditions. No need to feel terrible about it. But our freedom lies in that we have a standard of conduct which we will uphold. So in Buddha Dhamma we make it very clear that unwholesome and negative thoughts and emotions are not things that we can take responsibility for and that we should feel bad about, but that we should seek to heal or to deal with. We realize that they've arisen because of ways that we've acted, ways that we've thought in the past. These are ingrained habits, but they're not inherent in our minds and our consciousness. They're things that have accumulated until they've become automatic in our minds, but through supporting wholesome dhammas of kindness and wisdom and mindfulness and so on, then they can be gradually undermined. And then those thoughts and mental states that pop up into the mind spontaneously change in nature. and become more and more wholesome and good and kind. So there's nothing fixed in the mind at all. There are merely energies and things which have been promoted and been encouraged, sometimes over many lifetimes. Those, in that case, takes quite a while to deal with these things and to be very patient. So rather than looking at precepts as commandments, we're looking at them as ways of developing mindfulness, groundedness in daily life, giving us certain standards that we can come back to and to align our behavior, practically speaking, with our ideals. And they are means by which we can create practically the kind of families and the kind of communities that everybody wants to live in, where we feel a sense of trust, kindness, warmth, safety, security. So the training in precepts is considered absolutely essential to the higher or the more subtle levels of training, because without that foundation in sila, we tend to lack the self-confidence, we tend to lack the good feeling towards ourselves, the self-esteem, self-respect, that sense of being a good friend to yourself, which is essential when you are starting to enter into areas of experience which are strange or unusual or unprecedented. And that kind of emotional stability that comes from leading a blameless life is absolutely essential. So there are a lot of teachings which speak of the person on the path, or the person who is steadfast on the path, the person who is the good man or the good woman. They call the Sappurisa. And there's one particular group of Dhammas or virtues of the good person, which I think are quite useful to learn about and to memorize, again, as kind of a checkpoints for your own practice. And they are essentially things that you know, or a wise person will know, or will have some acquaintance with and have some grounding in. And the first two are a pair, and one is knowing the causes, the conditions of things, and one is knowing the results or the goal of things. So I think, generally speaking, we can see in many people tend to have an imbalance here. Some people very inspired with ideals and slogans and find some kind of exasperation and with the nitty-bitty, the details, the actual work needed to actualize those ideals. I think just want the sort of broad strokes of sort of the big picture in this, and finding that emphasis on methods, methodology, on what we're doing right now, step by step, to be a bit depressing and a bit kind of just a hard drudge, whereas the moment you think of sort of great spiritual ideas and spiritual enlightenment, well, it's just full of energy. And so the problem being that one's just feeding off some idea rather than doing the work which will lead to the idea, and perhaps lacking the understanding of what exactly are the causal conditions for realizing that. So the wise person is one who is very meticulous in terms of understanding and actualizing the causes and conditions for success in any particular endeavor. The other extreme, of course, is when people just get too caught up in the details of things, very meticulous, very careful, so on, but forget why they're doing it in the first place. So this is why the second virtue of the wise person is that they always keep the goal in mind. And so what's the big picture here? What are we doing this for in the first place? If you're sometimes in relationships where you can get into these kind of ongoing arguments where everything just shrinks down to having a victory in this particular argument, or having the last word, or being the one who is acknowledged to be right, and perhaps giving that so much importance that being willing to do long-term damage to a relationship, forgetting the whole point of living together in the first place. So the wise person is one who gives equal value, appropriate value to causes, techniques, methods, and is constantly looking to improve. This is a factor which has a particular quality or name in Pali, or vimamsa, which means constantly checking and looking for faults in the way that you do things, not taking things for granted and say, well, I've done it like this is the way I do it, it's my style, it's right, it's good enough. But being humble enough, willing enough to look again and to make changes and to learn from mistakes. But at the same time, keeping in mind the overall goal. What is the reason? What is the purpose? Why am I doing this? For what purpose? This is very important reflection in our lives, and one which has significance for time management. Of course, there's that kind of nice. This isn't a Buddhist thing, but I think it's within the boundaries of like that. What is it? I'm thinking in Thai now. Urgent and necessary, necessary not urgent, urgent not necessary, not necessary not urgent. So, being able to do what's both necessary and urgent first, and what's not necessary and not urgent last, or not at all. The second and the third one, I think, are probably the most interesting. Things which are urgent and not necessary, and necessary and not urgent, because I think we tend to put the urgent but not necessary before necessary and not urgent. It's one of the reasons why so few people keep up their meditation practice on a regular basis. So these two points of the method, the methodology, the practice and the results, both on the day-to-day level and on a sort of a larger long-term level. Next one is knowing yourself, and this can seem a little strange given the well-known Buddhist emphasis on teaching of not self, but the word self is used by the Buddha in the conventional level, meaning an awareness of your strong point